My son sat alone at a table set for 20 people staring at an uncut Spider-Man cake, while the ice cream melted into a sticky puddle. Not a single member of my family showed up. No grandparents, no aunts, no uncles. Just silence in a room full of screaming children. 3 days later, my father texted me. He did not apologize. He did not ask how my son was. He sent a bill for $4,200 for my brother Dante's graduation party. He expected me to pay it because that is what I always did. I was the family ATM. But looking at my son's heartbroken face, something inside me finally snapped. I opened my banking app and sent exactly $2 with the memo, "Best wishes." Then I called a locksmith. Then I called the tow truck company. They thought they could break into my house to demand the rest of the money, but when the police arrived, my family realized too late that the Bank of Monique was permanently closed. Before I tell you how I dismantled their lives piece by piece, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the scapegoat in a family of narcissists. My name is Monique, and I am a 32-year-old senior insurance claims adjuster living in Atlanta. My job is literally to detect fraud, to spot when someone is trying to get something for nothing, and to determine the true value of a loss. I am excellent at my job. I can look at a fender bender and tell you if the driver is faking a neck injury. I can look at a storm damage report and tell you if the homeowner took a hammer to their own roof. Yet for my entire adult life, I could not see the fraud living right under my nose, my own family. I grew up in a house where love was a transaction, and I was the one always paying the bill. My parents, Cedric and Viola, made it clear very early on that I existed to support the star of the show, my younger brother Dante. Dante was the golden child. If Dante sneezed, my mother called an ambulance. If I broke my arm, I was told to stop being dramatic. Now at 25, Dante was a man-child who had just completed an online certificate in nightclub management, a course that took him 4 years to finish because he was too busy partying. My parents treated this certificate like a Nobel Prize. Meanwhile, my master's degree and my 6-figure salary were just convenient tools to fund their lifestyle. But the blinders finally came off last Saturday. The venue was the Galaxy Fun Zone, an expensive arcade and pizza center that my son Leo had been begging to go to for months. Leo is a sensitive soul. He is 6 years old with big, trusting eyes that see the best in everyone. He spent weeks making handmade invitations for his grandparents and his uncle Dante. He drew little Spider-Men on them. He practiced how he would welcome them. I had reserved the party room for 2 hours. I paid the deposit. I ordered the deluxe package with the unlimited game cards. At 1 o'clock, the party started. Leo sat at the head of the long table, wearing his Spider-Man costume, his face glowing with anticipation. By 1:30, the glow had faded to a nervous twitch. By 2 o'clock, the pizza was cold and the cheese had congealed. I looked around the room. Other families were laughing. Grandfathers were helping toddlers aim water guns. Mothers were cutting cake. And there we were, me and Leo, surrounded by 19 empty chairs. The silence at our table was louder than the arcade noises around us. I pulled out my phone. I had called my mother 3 times, straight to voicemail. I called my father. Voicemail. I called Dante. Nothing. Finally, at 2:15, I called my mother Viola again. This time she answered. "Hello?" she said, her voice breathless and annoyed. "Monique, why are you blowing up my phone? We are busy." The background noise on her end was not an emergency room. It was not a car accident. It was upbeat pop music and the sound of hangers sliding on metal racks. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady so Leo wouldn't hear the shake in it. "It is 2:15. Leo's party started an hour ago. You said you would be here. You said the whole family was coming." There was a pause, followed by an exasperated sigh. "Oh, Monique, honestly, do not be so dramatic. We got held up. Dante needed to get fitted for his graduation suit. You know he has the ceremony next week. It is a big deal. We are at the mall and the tailor was running late." My hand gripped the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. You are at the mall. You are shopping for a suit while your grandson is sitting here crying over his birthday cake. Mom, you promised him. He is 6. Monique Viola snapped. He won't even remember this next year. Stop making everything about you. This is Dante's time. He is graduating. He is going to be a manager. We have to make sure he looks the part. We can't just drop everything because you decided to throw a party at some noisy arcade. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask to speak to Leo. She didn't even lie and say they were on their way. She just dismissed my son's existence as an inconvenience to Dante's wardrobe schedule. Monique, are you still there? She asked impatiently. Look, Courtney says the teal vest brings out Dante's eyes, so we are going to go with that. We might grab dinner at the Cheesecake Factory later. You can bring Leo by if you want, but make sure he is not hyper. We need to discuss the budget for Dante's gala. The budget. That was all I was to them, a wallet with a pulse. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye, I just pressed the red button. I walked back to the table. Leo was poking a pepperoni with a plastic fork. He looked up at me. His big brown eyes were filled with a knowledge that no 6-year-old should have. He didn't ask where they were. He didn't ask if they were lost. Mommy, he whispered. Yes, baby. Is it because I am not Uncle Dante? The question hit me like a physical blow to the chest. It knocked the wind out of me. My 6-year-old son had figured out the family hierarchy before he could even tie his own shoes. He knew he was second class. He knew that in the ecosystem of our family Dante was the sun, and we were just burnt rocks orbiting him. I sat down next to him and pulled him into my arms. I buried my face in his neck so he wouldn't feel my tears. No, baby, I said fiercely. It is not because of you. You are perfect. You are the most important boy in the world. They are the ones who are lost. They are the ones missing out. I looked at the empty chairs. I looked at the cold pizza. And I felt something die inside me. It was the hope. The stupid childish hope that if I just paid enough bills, if I just achieved enough success, if I just was good enough, my parents would finally love me and my son. But they didn't love us. They consumed us. I wiped my face. I signaled the waitress. Pack the cake up, I said. We are leaving. That night, I put Leo to bed. He fell asleep holding his Spider-Man toy, exhausted from the disappointment. I went into my home office and sat in the dark. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Dante. Bro, did you really hang up on Mom? That's disrespectful. Anyway, Courtney found a DJ for my party. He costs $800. Can you Zelle me the deposit? I stared at the screen. No happy birthday, Leo. No, sorry I missed it. Just give me money. For the first time in my life, I didn't reply. I didn't transfer the funds. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up my credit report. If I was going to go to war, I needed to know the terrain. I started digging into the finances I had intertwined with them for years. And what I found made the empty birthday party look like a mercy. They had not just ignored my son. They had been robbing me blind. The sadness evaporated. The tears dried up. In their place, a cold, hard rage settled in my chest. It was the kind of rage that burns slow and destroys everything in its path. You want a graduation gift, Dante, I whispered to the empty room. You want a party. Oh, I am going to give you a party. I am going to give you a lesson in economics that you will never forget. 3 days passed in silence. I didn't call. I didn't text. They probably thought I was sulking. They probably thought I would get over it like I always did. They thought the bank would reopen on Monday. Then came the text from my father. The text that sealed their fate. Monique, stop acting childish. We need to finalize the graduation. The venue needs payment today. Total is $4,200. Send it now so we don't lose the reservation. Family first? Family first. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. I opened my banking app. I typed in my father's number. I entered the amount. $2. And then I hit send. The war had begun. 3 days. That is exactly 72 hours of silence. For 3 days, I waited for my phone to ring with an apology. I waited for my mother to say she made a mistake. I waited for my father to ask if Leo was okay after spending his 6th birthday staring at empty chairs. I even foolishly waited for Dante to send a text saying sorry for missing the party because he was too busy becoming the next nightlife mogul of Atlanta. But the phone stayed dark. The silence in my house was heavy, broken only by the sound of Leo playing quietly in his room, his spirit noticeably dimmer than it was last week. Then on Tuesday afternoon, while I was reviewing a claim for a flooded basement, my phone finally buzzed. It was a text from my father, Cedric. My heart actually skipped a beat. For a split second, the little girl inside me, the one who just wanted her daddy to love her, thought this was it. This was the moment he would make it right. I picked up the phone. I unlocked the screen. And I stared at the message that would officially end my relationship with my family. There was no greeting. There was no apology. There was just a photo of a handwritten list on a napkin followed by a text message that read, Monique, we finalized the numbers for Dante's graduation bash on Saturday. We need to lock this in by tonight so the venue doesn't give our slot away. Here is the breakdown. Send the total to Dante's Zelle immediately. I opened the photo. My father's handwriting, usually so chicken scratch, was surprisingly clear when it came to asking for money. The itemized list read like a rider for a rap star, not a party for a 25-year-old who just finished an online certificate program. Item 1. Rooftop VIP section at the Sky Lounge. $2,000. Item 2. Private DJ set by DJ K Smooth. $800. Item 3. Premium open bar package including Hennessy and Moet. $1,400. Total due. $4,200. I sat there in my home office, the air conditioning humming around me, feeling the blood drain from my face. They wanted $4,000 for liquor, for a DJ, for a rooftop view. Just 72 hours ago, they couldn't be bothered to drive 20 minutes to a family fun center for their grandson. They couldn't spend $20 on a toy. But they expected me to drop $4,000 so Dante could pretend he was a celebrity for a night. The audacity was so breathtaking I almost respected it. Almost. Before I could even process the rage boiling in my gut, a second text came through. This one was from a number I had saved as Courtney, Dante's fiancée. Courtney was a piece of work. She was the kind of woman who smiled with her teeth, but never with her eyes. She had moved into my parents' house 6 months ago and had already mastered the art of spending money she didn't earn. Her message popped up on the screen, a bubble of pure toxicity. Hey Monique, hope you are good. Just following up on Cedric's text. Can you please transfer that money within the hour? I need to put the deposit down for the bottle service girls. Also, just a friendly reminder for Saturday. Please try to dress a bit more upscale than usual. We invited some of Dante's potential investors and industry connections. We want to make sure the family represents him well. Don't embarrass him in front of his friends. Thanks, sis. I read the message twice, then a third time. Don't embarrass him. I looked down at my silk blouse and tailored slacks. I looked around my 4-bedroom home that I bought with my own money. I thought about my credit score, which was near perfect. I thought about my career, my investments, and the fact that I had never asked anyone for a dime since I was 18. And then I thought about Dante. Dante, who wore fake designer belts. Dante, who borrowed my car and returned it with the gas tank empty. Dante, whose idea of a career plan was posting photos of bottle service on Instagram. And Courtney had the nerve to tell me not to embarrass him. I put the phone down on my desk. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. In my line of work, we deal with risk assessment. We look at a situation, evaluate the cost, and decide if the premium is worth the coverage. For years, I had been paying the premium on this family. I paid for the vacations. I paid for the car repairs. I paid for the bail money that one time Dante got caught joyriding. I paid because I thought that was the price of admission for their love. I thought if I paid enough eventually, I would be worth something to them. But looking at that invoice, I realized the coverage had lapsed a long time ago. They didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as a resource. I was an extraction point, a gold mine they could dig into whenever they wanted without ever having to worry about reclamation. I opened my banking app. I logged in with my Face ID. The numbers on the screen were healthy. I had the money. I could transfer $4,200 right now and not even feel it financially. It would be easy. It would keep the peace. It would make my father stop texting. It would make Courtney smile her fake smile. I hovered my thumb over the transfer button. Then I looked at the picture on my desk. It was a photo of Leo from his birthday party 3 days ago. He was wearing his Spider-Man mask, but you could see his slumped shoulders. You could see the sadness in his posture. If I paid this money, I wasn't just being a pushover. I was betraying my son. I was funding the very people who broke his heart. I was telling the universe that it was okay to treat us like dirt as long as they sent me a bill afterwards. $4,200 for alcohol and a DJ, $0 for a grandson's birthday. The math didn't add up. And I am an adjuster. I don't approve claims that don't add up. I looked at Courtney's text again. Don't embarrass him. A cold, calm clarity settled over me. It was the same feeling I got when I caught a fraudster in a lie during a deposition. It wasn't anger anymore. It was strategy. You want a contribution? I whispered to the empty room. You want me to support Dante's big day. You want me to make sure I don't embarrass the family. Okay, I will give you exactly what you deserve. I didn't reply to the texts. I didn't call and scream. Screaming shows you care. Screaming shows you are hurt. I wasn't hurt. I was done. The banking app on my phone glowed with a soft blue light illuminating the darkened room where I sat. My thumb hovered over the transfer button. For a brief fleeting second, the old Monique, the people-pleaser who had spent 3 decades trying to buy her family's affection, tried to take the wheel. She whispered that $4,200 was a small price to pay to avoid a war. She whispered that if I just paid for the rooftop bar and the premium Hennessy, maybe my father would finally say he was proud of me. Maybe my mother would stop criticizing my parenting. Maybe Dante would actually act like a brother instead of a leech. But then I looked at the Spider-Man mask sitting on the corner of my desk. It was limp and lifeless, discarded by a 6-year-old boy who had gone to sleep asking why his grandparents didn't want to see him. The old Monique died in that moment. The new Monique looked at the request for $4,200 and saw it for what it was. It was not a request for help. It was a ransom note. They were holding my desire for belonging hostage, and the price was funding Dante's delusions of grandeur. I tapped the backspace key. The 4 disappeared. The 2 disappeared. The zeros vanished. I typed in a new number, 2. I added a decimal point, 0, 0, $2. It looked pathetic on the screen. It looked like a mistake, but it was the most intentional calculation I had ever made in my life. In my line of work, we determine the replacement value of an asset. If you treat a relationship like trash, you cannot expect to be reimbursed for gold. I had calculated the value of their loyalty, their presence at my son's birthday, and their respect for me as a human being. The actuarial tables in my head ran the numbers, and the result was exactly $2. I moved to the memo line. This was the most important part. A transaction without a message could be misinterpreted as a typo. I needed to be surgical. I needed to make sure that when Dante received this notification in front of his fiancée and his so-called investors, he knew exactly why this was happening. I typed slowly, savoring every letter. Happy graduation. Here is the true value of the respect you showed Leo. Do not spend it all at once. I read it over. It was cold, it was direct, it was perfect. I pressed confirm. The screen swirled for a second, processing the data. Then a green check mark appeared. Sent. $2 had been transferred from my account to Dante Sterling. I placed the phone face down on the mahogany desk. I picked up my glass of wine and took a long, slow sip. The silence in the room felt different now. It was the heavy, charged silence of a fuse burning down toward a pile of dynamite. I counted in my head. 1, 2, 3. On the count of 10, the phone buzzed against the wood. It was a short, aggressive vibration. A text message. Then it buzzed again. And again. Within seconds, the phone was vibrating continuously, dancing across the surface of the desk like a possessed object. The screen lit up with a relentless stream of notifications. I picked it up. 50 missed calls, 27 text messages, and they were still coming. The first text was from Dante. "What is this?" The second text came 3 seconds later. "Is this a joke? You sent me $2. I need 4,000. Fix this now." I didn't reply. I just watched the bubbles appear, imagining the panic rising in his chest. He was probably at the venue right now, trying to put down a deposit, holding up the line while Courtney glared at him. Then came the rage. The facade of the cool, successful businessman cracked wide open, revealing the spoiled brat underneath. "Are you crazy?" he wrote. "I am standing here with the event coordinator. I told Courtney you were covering the bill. She is crying, 'Monique, you are making me look broke in front of my wife.'" I laughed out loud. "You are broke, Dante," I whispered to the screen. "That is the point." The phone started ringing. Dante's face appeared on the screen. I declined the call. He called back immediately. I declined again. Then my father Cedric joined the fray. His texts were less frantic but more menacing. He was used to being the patriarch whose word was law. "Monique, Dante just showed me the transfer. This is not funny. You are embarrassing the family. We have guests flying in. Send the full amount immediately or do not bother coming on Saturday." I almost typed back that I had no intention of coming to a party celebrating a fraudulent degree, but I stopped myself. Silence was a louder weapon. Then Courtney, the puppet master, sent a paragraph that took up the entire screen. "I do not know what kind of sick power trip you are on, but this is low, even for you. Dante is stressed out of his mind. We have investors coming to this party who are going to fund his nightclub venture. If we lose this venue, he loses his credibility. You are sabotaging his future because you are jealous. Fix it, or I will make sure everyone knows what kind of sister you really are." Jealous. That was their favorite word. They truly believed I sat in my paid-off house with my fully funded retirement account and my thriving career and envied Dante's ability to spend money he didn't have on people who didn't care about him. The phone vibrated again. It was Dante. "Pick up the phone, you witch. You want me to die of shame?" "Is that it?" I promised them. I promised everyone. I finally unlocked the phone, but not to reply. I opened the group chat where they were all currently screaming into the void. I took a screenshot of the $2 transfer confirmation. I circled the memo line where I mentioned Leo. And I posted it to the chat. Then I typed one single sentence. "The bank is closed due to lack of appreciation." I set the phone to do not disturb. But even on silent, the screen kept lighting up. It was a strobe light of fury. They were calling from my mother's phone now, then from the house landline. They were desperate. They weren't mad because they missed me. They were mad because without my credit card, the house of cards they had built was collapsing in real time. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. It was a quiet, peaceful night in my neighborhood, but I knew the storm was moving this way. My family was not the type to take a no gracefully. They were entitled. They felt the world owed them, and by extension, I owed them. I saw a car drive slowly past my house. It wasn't them, just a neighbor, but it reminded me of something crucial. They had keys. Years ago, when I bought this place, I had given my mother a spare key for emergencies. I had given Dante the code to the garage keypad so he could water my plants when I traveled for work. I turned away from the window. The $2 wasn't just a payment, it was a declaration of war, and in war you secure your perimeter. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. The locksmith was 20 minutes away, but I wasn't going to wait. I wedged a chair under the front doorknob. I went to the garage and reset the keypad code. I checked the cameras I had installed last month after a package theft. They were recording. My phone was still lighting up on the desk across the room. I could see Dante's name flashing. He was probably screaming into my voicemail, threatening me, begging me, cursing me. He didn't understand that he was talking to a ghost. The sister who craved his approval had been buried alongside the uneaten birthday cake. I walked back to the desk and picked up the phone. I didn't block them. That would be too easy. I wanted a record. I wanted every threat, every insult, every attempt at manipulation saved in high definition. In my line of work, documentation is everything. And if my instincts were right, I was going to need a lot of evidence for what was coming next. Because people like Dante and Courtney don't stop when you cut them off. They escalate. They were coming for me. Not with love, not with an apology, but with the full force of their entitlement. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to open the door. I was going to let them break their hands pounding on it. My office on the 22nd floor of the Prudential building was my sanctuary. It was a world of hushed tones, soft carpet, and the rhythmic clicking of keyboards. Here logic ruled. Here numbers behaved. Here, if something did not add up, I could reject it with a red stamp and move on with my day. I was reviewing a suspicious claim involving a staged car accident when the intercom on my desk buzzed. It was Sarah, the receptionist. Her voice, usually professional and bright, was tight with panic. "Monique," she whispered, "there are 2 women here to see you." Security tried to stop them at the turnstile, but they started screaming that it was a family emergency. "They are making a scene, Monique. Everyone is looking." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. I did not have to ask who they were. I checked my watch. It was 10 in the morning on a Wednesday. My mother Viola should have been at her bridge club. Courtney should have been sleeping in until noon. But instead they were in the lobby of a Fortune 500 insurance firm launching a tactical assault on my career. Most people would have hidden under their desk. Most people would have begged security to make them go away quietly. But I closed the file on my computer. I took a sip of my water. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I was done hiding. If they wanted to bring the circus to my workplace, they were about to find out that I was the ringmaster. I walked to the elevator bank and pressed the button for the lobby. When the doors opened, the sound hit me first. It was a high-pitched theatrical wailing that echoed off the marble floors and glass walls. A small crowd of my colleagues had gathered near the reception desk, whispering and pointing. In the center of the storm stood my mother and Courtney. Viola was wearing her Sunday best, a pastel yellow suit with a matching hat, clutching her chest as if she were having a heart attack. Courtney was playing the role of the distraught sister-in-law, wiping imaginary tears from her eyes, while aggressively filming the security guards with her phone. "My daughter works here," Viola shrieked, her voice carrying all the way to the elevators. "She is a senior adjuster. She makes 6 figures. And she is letting her own brother starve. She is letting him lose his future over a few dollars. What kind of company employs a monster who abandons her family?" Courtney chimed in, pointing her phone camera at Sarah, the receptionist. "We just want to talk to her. We need help. Dante is sitting at home in the dark because she cut him off. He is a good boy. He is trying to graduate. Why are you people protecting her?" I stepped out of the elevator. The sound of my heels clicking on the marble was sharp and authoritative. The crowd parted for me. I saw my boss, Mr. Henderson, standing near the security desk looking alarmed. He saw me and relief washed over his face. "Monique," he said, stepping forward, "do you know these people?" I did not look at him. I looked straight at Viola. When she saw me, her eyes lit up with triumph. She thought she had won. She thought the public shame would break me. She thought I would pull out my checkbook right there in the lobby just to make the noise stop. She stopped wailing instantly and transformed into the grieving mother. "Monique," she gasped, reaching out a hand. "Thank God. Please, just pay the venue. Dante is crying his eyes out. He says he is going to cancel the graduation." "How can you be so cruel? It is $4,000. You make that in a week. Do not be selfish." Courtney stepped up beside her, crossing her arms. The fake tears vanished, replaced by a smirk only I could see. You see what you are doing to your mother, Monique. She is a wreck. Just fix this. Be the bigger person. I looked at them. I really looked at them. I looked at my mother's handbag. It was a Louis Vuitton, likely a knockoff, but still expensive. I looked at the ring on Courtney's finger. I looked at the brand new iPhone 15 Pro Max in her hand. And then I thought about Dante, the brother they claimed was starving in the dark. The brother who owned 10 pairs of Jordan sneakers, each worth more than my monthly utility bill. The brother who needed a $4,000 rooftop party to feel validated. The audacity was breathtaking. They were using my success as a weapon against me. They were banking on the fact that corporate America fears a scandal. They thought I would crumble to protect my reputation, but they forgot what I do for a living. I investigate fraud. And this was the clumsiest attempt at fraud I had ever seen. I turned to Mr. Henderson. I turned to the heads of security, a large man named Ralph who looked ready to tackle someone. I apologize for the disturbance. I said, my voice calm, projecting clearly across the silent lobby. I want to clarify something immediately. These women are claiming financial hardship. They are claiming that my brother is destitute and that I am neglecting a family emergency. Viola nodded vigorously. Yes. Yes, she is. It is an emergency. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I did not open my banking app. I opened my photo gallery. I tapped on the video from 3 days ago. The video of the empty party room. The video of the uneaten cake. The video of Leo sitting alone. I held the screen up to Mr. Henderson, then I held it up to Ralph. This was Saturday, I said. This was my son's 6th birthday party. I paid for everything. I invited 20 family members, including these 2 women, including the brother they say is starving. I let the video play. The silence in the lobby changed. It went from awkward to horrified. My colleagues watched the footage of the lonely little boy in the Spider-Man costume. They did not show up. I continued, my voice hardening. Not one of them. They were at the mall shopping for the outfits they are wearing right now, and the emergency they are screaming about. It is a bill for a rooftop party with premium liquor and a private DJ. I turned back to Viola. Her jaw had dropped. The color was draining from her face. She realized too late that she had stepped into my courtroom, not my living room. You are not here because you are hungry, Mom, I said. You are here because I finally closed the bank. You are here because I sent $2 instead of 4,000. Courtney tried to interrupt. That is a lie. He needs that money for... I cut her off. For what? For his image? For his ego? I turned back to Ralph. Ralph, in my professional opinion as a fraud adjuster, this is an attempt at extortion. These individuals are harassing an employee to fund a lifestyle they cannot afford. They are using emotional blackmail and public disturbance to solicit funds. That is a security threat. Mr. Henderson looked at the women with disgust. He straightened his tie. Ralph, please escort these trespassers off the property. And if they return, call the police immediately. Trespassers. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Viola gasped. Monique, you cannot be serious. I am your mother. No, I said, stepping closer to her, invading her personal space for the first time. You were my mother when you needed money. When my son needed a grandmother, you were busy. Now you are just a woman making a scene in my lobby. Ralph stepped forward, his face grim. Ladies, let's go. Now. He put a hand on Courtney's elbow. She recoiled like she had been burned. Get off me! I am suing you. I am suing this whole company. You can try, I said. But remember, Courtney, I audit claims for a living. I know exactly what you are worth. And right now, your credibility is 0. Viola started to cry again, but this time the tears were real. They were tears of humiliation. She looked around the lobby and saw no sympathy, only judgment. The receptionists were shaking their heads. The businessmen in suits were checking their watches, annoyed by the noise. The stage she had built had collapsed under her feet. "Please, Monique," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Dante needs this." "Then Dante should get a job," I said. Ralph guided them toward the revolving doors. It was a long walk. I stood there and watched them go. I watched my mother's yellow suit disappear onto the busy street. I watched Courtney furiously typing on her phone, probably drafting a lying Facebook post. When the doors stopped spinning, the lobby fell silent. Mr. Henderson looked at me. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Take the rest of the day off, Monique," he said gently. "Go be with your son." I nodded. "Thank you, sir." I walked back to the elevator, my head held high. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From the sheer, intoxicating realization that the worst thing had happened. They had attacked me in my safe space. They had tried to destroy me. And I was still standing. I pressed the button for the 22nd floor. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the metal panel. I did not look like a victim. I looked like a woman who had just cleared a bad debt from her ledger. But I knew this wasn't over. Humiliation fuels narcissists like gasoline fuels a fire. They would not stop at a lobby scene. They would come for my home. They would come for my peace. They would try to hurt me in the only way they had left. I pulled out my phone and opened the app for my home security system. I checked the cameras. Everything was quiet. For now. I went back to my desk and sat down. I had work to do. But before I opened the next claim file, I made a call to my lawyer. It was time to prepare for the next wave. Because if I knew my family, the real storm was just beginning. And this time, I wasn't just going to weather it. I was going to direct it. The ride home from the office was supposed to be a victory lap. I had successfully defended my territory. I had expelled the invaders from my lobby. But as I merged onto the highway, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a dull, throbbing headache. My phone, which I had mounted on the dashboard, lit up with a notification. Then another. Then a deluge. It was not my family texting me this time. It was Facebook. It was Instagram. It was the entire digital ecosystem of our community in Atlanta. I pulled into a parking lot of a grocery store just to check the damage. I opened Facebook. The first thing on my timeline was a post from Courtney. It had been shared 40 times in the last hour. The photo was a masterpiece of manipulation. It showed Courtney and my mother Viola sitting on a park bench looking devastatingly sad. My mother was wiping a tear. Courtney was looking off into the distance, brave but broken. The caption read like a gothic novel. "It breaks my heart to air family laundry, but sometimes silence is just enabling abuse." Today, Viola and I were thrown out of a building by security guards simply for trying to beg a family member to have a heart. We did not ask for millions. We just asked for support for a young black man trying to graduate and make something of himself. It is sad when people get a little money and forget where they came from. They trade their soul for a corner office and leave their own brother behind. We are hurting, but we will rise. God sees all. Hashtag toxic family. Hashtag new money. Hashtag fake success. I scrolled through the comments. It was a firing squad. People I had known since high school, people from our church, even my old piano teacher were commenting. "Praying for you, Viola. Money is the root of all evil. This is disgusting. Who treats their mother like that?" I blocked her. That is what I did to my toxic sister. Stay strong. They were devouring my character. Courtney had painted a picture where I was the villainous corporate sellout and Dante was the struggling hero. She had weaponized my success against me. In their narrative, my six-figure salary was not the result of 80-hour work weeks and night school. It was proof that I had sold out. And Dante's unemployment was not laziness. It was systemic oppression that I was refusing to alleviate. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. I did not reply. I did not defend myself. In the court of public opinion, the person who screams the loudest usually wins the first round. But I do not play for the first round. I play for the verdict. I drove the rest of the way home in silence. As I turned onto my street, I noticed something strange, Mrs. Higgins, my 60-year-old neighbor who usually waved when she was watering her hydrangeas, saw my car and immediately turned her back. She marched into her house and slammed the door. The poison had already spread from the internet to the cul-de-sac. I pulled into my driveway. My headlights swept across the garage door and landed on my car, my pride and joy. A pearl white Lexus SUV that I had bought with my first big bonus 3 years ago. It was parked in the driveway because I had been cleaning the garage the night before. I slammed on the brakes. My breath caught in my throat. The pristine white paint on the driver's side door was gone. In its place, sprayed in jagged, dripping bright red paint, was a single word: cheap. It covered the entire door. The paint had run down onto the side skirt and dripped onto the concrete driveway like blood. I sat in the car for a full minute, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. This was not just vandalism. This was a message. This was them bringing the war to my doorstep. They wanted me to feel unsafe in my own home. They wanted to mar the symbols of my success because they could not claim them for themselves. I stepped out of the car. The smell of aerosol paint was still faint in the air. I walked around the vehicle. They had keyed the hood too, a long, deep scratch that went down to the metal. My first instinct was to call the police. My finger hovered over the dial button, but then I stopped. If I called the police now, they would file a report. They would ask for suspects. I would name my family. The police would go talk to them. They would deny it. It would be my word against theirs, and without hard proof, it would just be another family dispute. Courtney would post about it, claiming I was now trying to frame them. Number 1. I needed certainty. I walked to the front door, stepping over the red paint drips on the concrete. I unlocked the door and went straight to my home office. I sat down at my desk and pulled up the app for the security cameras I had installed just 48 hours ago. I scrubbed the timeline back. The vandalism had happened at 1:15 in the afternoon. Broad daylight. They were not even trying to hide. I pressed play. A hooded figure walked up the driveway. He was wearing baggy gray sweatpants and a black hoodie with the hood pulled up. But I recognized the walk. It was a distinctive, arrogant saunter. The walk of a man who thought the world owed him a living. Dante. He looked around nervously, but he did not look up at the eaves of the roof where the new 4K camera was hidden. He pulled a can of red spray paint from his pocket. He shook it. I watched my own brother. The boy I had babysitted, the boy I had bought lunch for 1,000 times, shake a can of paint and destroy my property. He sprayed the word, cheap. He laughed. I could see his shoulders shaking. Then he pulled out a key to scratch the hood. I paused the video. I zoomed in. On his feet were the Air Jordan 4 retro sneakers I had bought him for Christmas last year. The price tag was $500. He was destroying my car while wearing my money on his feet. I saved the clip. I backed it up to the cloud. I backed it up to a hard drive. Now I had the proof for the police. But something held me back. Why did he feel so comfortable doing this? Why was he so sure I would not retaliate? It hit me. He thought he was untouchable because our finances were still entangled. He thought that even if I was mad, I could not destroy him without destroying myself. He assumed I was still the co-signer on his life. I turned away from the camera feed. I looked at the filing cabinet in the corner of the room. It was a heavy, fireproof metal box where I kept all the important documents: the deeds, the titles, and the old loan agreements. I had not looked in the bottom drawer in 3 years. That was the drawer labeled Family Support. I walked over to the cabinet. I unlocked it. The drawer slid open with a heavy metallic sound. Inside were thick manila folders. I pulled them out one by one. The car loan for Dante's first vehicle, which I co-signed when he was 18. I thought he had paid it off. The student loan for the college semester he dropped out of. The personal loan my father took out for home repairs, which I guaranteed. I needed to know the exposure. I needed to know exactly how much leverage they thought they had. I sat on the floor surrounded by paper. I opened my laptop and logged into the credit monitoring service I used for work. I usually only checked my own score, which was impeccable. But today I typed in the social security numbers of the accounts linked to my address. I started digging, and what I found made the spray paint on my car look like a friendly greeting card. The vandalism was just a distraction. It was a temper tantrum. But the papers in front of me told a different story. A story of systematic long-term financial bleeding. I picked up a document from 2 years ago. It was a credit card application. It was in my name, Monique Williams. But the signature at the bottom was slightly off. The loop on the M was too wide. It looked like my father's handwriting. I checked the status of the card online. It was active. The limit was $15,000. The balance was $14,950. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I checked another one. A line of credit opened 6 months ago. In my name, co-signed by Dante. Wait, Dante had no income. How did he co-sign? I looked at the income declaration. It listed him as an employee of my company. They had used my identity. They had used my credit. They had built a secret life of luxury on a foundation of fraud using my name as the collateral. I looked out the window at my ruined car. Dante had called me cheap. He had sprayed it in red paint for the world to see. I looked down at the credit card statement filled with charges for liquor stores, hotels, and nightclubs. I am not cheap, Dante. I whispered, my voice shaking with a rage that was far more dangerous than the one I felt in the lobby. I am expensive, and you just defaulted on the debt. I gathered the papers. I did not call the police about the car. Not yet. The car was a misdemeanor. This was a federal felony. I picked up my phone. I dialed the number for the fraud department of the credit bureau. "This is Monique Williams," I said when the agent answered. "I am a senior claims adjuster. I am initiating a fraud investigation, and I want to flag every single account associated with my social security number as compromised. The suspects are known to me." I hung up. I looked at the camera feed where Dante was laughing as he vandalized my car. "Keep laughing, little brother," I thought. "Because I am not just going to sue you, I am going to erase you." I sat on the hardwood floor of my home office surrounded by a sea of paper. The air conditioner hummed a low, steady rhythm that usually calmed me, but tonight it sounded like a countdown. My laptop screen cast a ghostly blue light across the room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I had spent the last hour pulling every physical file I owned, but the real truth was hidden in the digital cloud. As a senior claims adjuster, I investigate people for a living. I look for the lies hidden in the margins. I look for the inconsistencies in the story. Tonight, the suspect was not a stranger faking a back injury. It was the people who gave me life. I logged into the National Credit Bureau portal. My fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory, typing in my social security number, my date of birth, and my mother's maiden name. I usually checked my credit score once a year. Just a quick glance to make sure everything was in the 800s. I had not looked at the detailed report in 18 months. I pressed enter and watched the spinning wheel. It felt like I was waiting for a biopsy result. The report loaded. The first thing I saw was the number of open accounts. 7. I froze. I counted the cards in my physical wallet. I had one debit card, one airline rewards card, and one emergency visa. That was 3. 3 legitimate accounts, 7 open accounts on the report. The math was not adding up. I clicked on the Details tab, expanding the list. My breath hitched in my throat. There were 3 credit cards I had never seen before: a Platinum American Express, a Discover card, and a high-interest store credit card for a luxury department store. I looked at the opening dates. The first one was opened 3 years ago, the second one 2 years ago, the third one just 6 months ago. I looked at the billing address for these mystery cards. It was not my address. It was 420 Oak Street, my parents' house. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. They had not just stolen my identity, they had rerouted the evidence to their own mailbox, so I would never see the statements. They had been living a double life on my credit rating. I clicked on the transaction history for the American Express. The balance was $15,000. I scrolled through the charges, and as I read them, pieces of my family history began to slot into place like a horrific puzzle. 2 years ago, my parents went on a second honeymoon to Jamaica. I remembered it vividly. My mother had bragged to the entire church that my father had won a sales bonus at work. She posted photos of them drinking rum punch on a private balcony. She brought me back a cheap magnet as a souvenir. I looked at the statement. June 12th. Sandals Resort, Jamaica. $4,500. My father did not win a bonus. I paid for that vacation. I paid for the rum punch. I paid for the flights. They had looked me in the eye, tanned and rested, and told me how blessed they were while standing on a foundation of theft. I opened the Discover card statement. This one was a map of Dante's ego, VIP tables at clubs, bottle service charges totaling thousands of dollars, a charge for a custom suit tailor, and endless transactions at the liquor store down the street from their house. The total debt across all three cards was $45,000. $45,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was a college fund for Leo. That was my hard-earned money converted into hangovers and fake status for my brother and parents. But the worst was yet to come. I scrolled down to the installment loans section. There was a new entry, an auto loan. The loan was for $55,000. The collateral was a Dodge Charger, Dante's car. I stared at the screen. Dante had driven that car to my house just a few hours ago to vandalize my property. He had bragged for months that he bought it with his own investment earnings. He told everyone he was a self-made man. I clicked on the View Contract button. The digital copy of the loan agreement popped up. I zoomed in on the signature line. There were two signatures. The primary borrower was Dante Sterling. His signature was a messy scrawl. The CO signer was Monique Williams. But I had never signed that paper. I had never stepped foot in that dealership. I leaned closer to the screen, studying the handwriting of the co-signer. It was not Dante's handwriting. He was too lazy to forge something this precise. The M in Monique had a distinctive sharp loop at the top. The Q curled downward with a heavy pressure point. I knew that hand. I had seen it on my report cards growing up. I had seen it on birthday cards. I had seen it on the check he gave me for graduation that bounced. It was my father's handwriting. Cedric. My father. The man who demanded respect. The man who quoted scripture at the dinner table, had sat in a car dealership and forged his daughter's name to buy a toy for his son. He had looked at a legal document knowing it would anchor me to $55,000 of debt, and he had signed it without a trembling hand. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were hot and angry. This was not just financial abuse. This was a betrayal of the highest order. My father had sold my financial future to buy Dante a car. He valued Dante's happiness more than my security. He valued Dante's image more than my consent. I looked out the window at my own car, covered in red spray paint. The word cheap was dripping down the door. The irony was suffocating. Dante called me cheap while driving a car that I legally owned. He was vandalizing my property while I was unknowingly paying for his. I wiped my eyes. I did not have time to cry. I was an adjuster, and I had just found the smoking gun. I hit the print button. The printer in the corner whirred to life, spitting out page after page of evidence. I printed the statements. I printed the loan agreement. I printed the credit report. I picked up the stack of warm paper. It felt heavy. It felt like a weapon. For years they had told me I was part of the family, but I was just the host body for their parasitic lifestyle. They thought I would never check. They thought I was too busy working, too busy being the good daughter to ever look under the hood of our relationship. But they forgot one thing. I check everything. I looked at the auto loan document again. Since my name was on the title as a co-buyer, that meant I had rights. It meant I was not just a victim. I was an owner. A cold smile touched my lips. You like that car, Dante? You like how it roars when you rev the engine? You like how Courtney looks at you in the passenger seat? Well, enjoy it for tonight. Because I just realized that I have a spare set of keys. Not physical keys, but legal ones. I reached for my phone. I was not calling the police to report the vandalism anymore. That was small potatoes. I was calling a repossession company. And then I was calling the fraud department of the FBI. Identify theft is a federal crime. Wire fraud is a federal crime. Forgery is a felony. My father wanted to be the head of the household. He wanted to make the big decisions. Well, he had made a decision to become a criminal. And now I was going to make the decision to be the prosecution. I organized the papers into neat piles. The sadness was gone. It had been replaced by a icy resolve. They had stolen $45,000, but the price they were about to pay would be so much higher. I picked up a red marker and circled my father's forged signature on the car loan. Nice try, Dad, I whispered. But you forgot to cross your T's. And I am about to dot every single I. The red spray paint on my driveway was still wet, glowing like a fresh wound under the security lights. I stood there staring at the word cheap, scrawled across the door of my Lexus, but my mind was miles away. I was thinking about a different car. I was thinking about the matte black Dodge Charger Hellcat that occupied the place of honor in my parents' driveway. Dante called it the Beast. For the last 6 months, it had been his entire personality. He posted daily videos of himself revving the engine doing burnouts in parking lots and captioning every photo with phrases like self-made and hustle hard. He told everyone, including our extended family and his jealous friends, that our parents had bought it for him as a graduation gift. A $55,000 reward for finishing a community college certificate. I walked back into my house and picked up the stack of papers I had just printed from the credit bureau. The auto loan agreement was right on top. There it was in black and white. Primary borrower, Dante Sterling. Co-borrower, Monique Williams. My father had forged my signature to secure the financing because Dante had a credit score lower than his age, and my father was already maxed out. They needed a host body with perfect credit to absorb the risk, and I was the designated sacrifice. I sat down at my desk and opened my mail. Buried between a flyer for pizza and a utility bill was an envelope from a high-risk auto insurance company. It was addressed to Monique Williams and Dante Sterling. I had never opened these before because I assumed they were junk mail or perhaps related to my own policies. But now I tore it open. It was a notice of cancellation. The policy on the Dodge Charger was 3 months past due. They were driving a high-performance vehicle on public roads with no coverage. A cold chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. In my line of work, we call this a catastrophic liability exposure. If Dante hit someone tonight, if he crippled a pedestrian or smashed into a school bus, the lawsuits would not stop at him. They would come for the CO owner. They would come for me. They would garnish my wages, seize my assets, and destroy the career I had spent a decade building. My father had not just stolen my money, he had strapped a bomb to my financial future and handed the detonator to an idiot who liked to drive 100 miles per hour on the freeway. I looked at the clock. It was 2 in the morning. Most people would be pacing the floor or crying. I did neither. I reached for my business card holder and pulled out a card for Miller & Sons Recovery. They were a repossession agency I worked with frequently on insurance fraud cases. They were efficient. They were aggressive, and they worked 24 hours a day. I dialed the number. A gruff voice answered on the second ring. Miller Recovery Dispatch. Hello, this is Monique Williams. I am a senior adjuster with Prudential, but I am calling as a private client. I have a vehicle that needs an immediate involuntary repossession. The dispatcher typed something in the background. Do you have the paperwork, Ms. Williams? I have the loan agreement listing me as the co-buyer. I have the title application. And I have a police report number pending for identity theft regarding the loan origination, but for tonight, I just want to exercise my right as the legal owner to secure the asset. The insurance has lapsed and the primary driver is operating the vehicle recklessly. I gave him the VIN number, I gave him the license plate, and then I gave him the address. 420 Oak Street. My parents' house. The dispatcher paused. That is a residential pickup. We usually prefer to grab them at a workplace or a store to avoid a domestic incident. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the footage of Dante vandalizing my car. The vehicle will be there, I said calmly. And here is the kicker. I have a spare key fob. My father, in his arrogance, had left a spare key to the charger in a junk drawer at his house during Thanksgiving. I had taken it by mistake, thinking it was the key to his truck, which I sometimes borrowed to haul furniture. It had been sitting in my kitchen drawer for 6 months. I walked to the kitchen and found it. It was heavy and plastic with the Dodge Ram logo on the back. I can meet your driver at the end of the block, I told the dispatcher. I will hand over the key. He will not have to tow it. He can just unlock it and drive it away. It will be silent. I could hear the smile in the dispatcher voice. That makes our job a lot easier. We have a truck in the area. We can be there in 45 minutes. Book it, I said. I hung up and changed into black leggings and a dark hoodie. I grabbed the spare key. I drove my vandalized Lexus to a parking lot 3 blocks away from my parents' house and waited. 40 minutes later, a tow truck rumbled into view, followed by a chase car. A man with tattoos on his neck got out. I rolled down my window and handed him the key fob. Be careful, I said. He treats that car like his child. If he hears you, he will come out swinging. The repo man laughed. Lady, I have taken cars from drug dealers and senators. A college kid does not scare me. I watched them drive toward the house. I did not follow. I did not want to be seen. I wanted to imagine the scene. I wanted to visualize Dante waking up the next morning, grabbing his phone to check his Instagram likes, walking out the front door to admire his beast, and finding nothing but an oil stain on the driveway. I drove home, but I did not go to sleep. I opened my laptop and went to Dante's Facebook page. His latest post was from 2 hours ago. It was a picture of him sitting on the hood of the Charger holding a bottle of cheap champagne. The caption read, "Graduation vibe starting early. Cannot stop a boss. The haters are mad because I am winning." I looked at the timestamp. He had posted that right after he vandalized my car. He thought he had won the war. He thought that by scratching my paint he had taught me a lesson. He did not realize that while he was spray painting my door, I was repossessing his identity. I clicked on the comment section. Courtney had commented with 3 fire emojis. My father had commented, "Proud of you, son." I typed a comment of my own. I knew I should not. I knew it was petty. But after finding $45,000 of fraud in my name, I felt entitled to a little pettiness. I typed, "Enjoy the walk to the bus stop." Then I deleted it. No. Silence was better. The empty driveway would speak louder than anything I could write. I went to bed, but before I closed my eyes, I sent one final email. It was to the fraud department of the bank that held the auto loan. I attached the police report I had filed online. I attached the affidavit of forgery, and I attached a formal request to have my name removed from the loan and the debt transferred solely to Cedric Sterling and Dante Sterling. The repo man was just the beginning. By the time the sun came up, the car would be in an impound lot accruing fees that Dante could not pay. The bank would call the loan due immediately because the insurance had lapsed, and since I had frozen the credit cards, they would have no way to bail themselves out. I fell asleep listening to the hum of the air conditioner, thinking about the word cheap on my car door. It would cost me $500 to repaint that door. But it was going to cost Dante $55,000 and a felony charge to learn that you never bite the hand that feeds you, especially when that hand knows how to sign a repossession order. The beast was gone, and the beauty of it was, I did not have to pay a dime to make it happen. I just had to take back what was legally mine. The silence in my house was heavy, but for the first time in a week, it was not the silence of grief. It was the silence of a hunter waiting in a blind. I sat at my kitchen island, my phone resting on the cold granite countertop. It was Friday afternoon. The graduation party was scheduled for tomorrow night. By my calculations based on the frantic silence from the family group chat over the last 24 hours, they were desperate. They had likely tried to secure a loan and failed. They had likely tried to charm the venue manager and failed. They were staring down the barrel of public humiliation, and they knew there was only one person in the world who could save them. Me. I looked at the stack of papers I had printed the night before, the repo order, the fraud affidavit, the lawsuit for the vandalism. They were sitting in a neat pile next to a large, glossy black gift box I had bought from a craft store. To anyone else, it looked like a present. To me, it looked like a coffin for their entitlement. I knew my family. I knew their psychology better than I knew my own insurance policies. If I attacked them directly, they would band together, they would play the victim, they would scream that I was bitter and jealous. But if I gave them what they wanted, if I fed their ego one last time, they would lower their shields. They would walk right into the slaughterhouse believing they were the guests of honor. I picked up my phone. I needed to send the text that would bring them to my door. I had to swallow my pride. I had to type words that tasted like ash in my mouth. I had to channel the old Monique, the doormat they loved so much. I typed slowly. Hey everyone. I have been doing a lot of thinking. I am sorry about the scene at my office and the $2. I was just hurt and stressed from work, but that is no excuse to abandon family. I do not want Dante to lose his big day. I want to make this right. I will pay for the party. And Dante, I saw the credit card bills. I will clear those too so you can start fresh. Please come over for dinner tonight. I have the cash ready. Let's heal this. I read it over. It was pathetic. It was groveling. It was exactly what they wanted to hear. I hit send. I set the phone down and waited. I expected them to play hard to get. I expected them to make me wait an hour just to punish me. I was wrong. 30 seconds later, the phone buzzed. It was a text from Courtney. Finally. I knew you would come to your senses. We were about to cut you off for good, Monique. You are lucky we are forgiving people. We will be there at 7. And make sure it is cash. Dante does not want any transfers leaving a paper trail right now. I stared at the screen. The arrogance was breathtaking. You are lucky we are forgiving people. They vandalized my car, they stole my identity, they ignored my son, and yet in their twisted reality, they were the ones showing mercy by accepting my money and the demand for cash. That confirmed my suspicions. They were probably afraid that if I transferred the money, I could reverse it later, or perhaps they owed money to people who did not accept Zelle. It did not matter. I had no intention of giving them a single cent. I spent the next 3 hours setting the stage. I ordered expensive takeout from a steakhouse, the kind of food my father loved but could never afford. I set the table with my good china. I put a bottle of wine in the chiller. Then I prepared the gift. I placed the evidence inside the black box. The repo order went on the bottom. The fraud report went in the middle. The civil lawsuit for the car paint damage went on top. And right on the very top, I placed a small handheld mirror. I taped a note to the glass that read, "Look at the only person responsible for your life." I tied the box with a beautiful silver ribbon. It looked expensive. It looked like it contained stacks of $100 bills. I placed it in the center of the dining table as the centerpiece. At 6:55, a car pulled into my driveway. I checked the camera. It was my mother's old sedan. They all piled out. Dante, Cedric, Viola, and Courtney. They were dressed up not for dinner, but for victory. Dante was wearing a designer tracksuit that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. Courtney was wearing heels that clicked loudly on the pavement. They did not look at my Lexus, which I had parked in the garage to hide the damage. They walked straight to the front door and didn't even knock. They just walked in. I stood in the hallway, forcing a smile onto my face. "Hey," I said softly. "Thank you for coming." My father walked past me without making eye contact. He sniffed the air. "Is that steak?" "Good. I am starving." All this drama has given me an ulcer. My mother stopped and looked me up and down. She shook her head. You look tired, Monique. Stress really ages you. You should take better care of yourself. Maybe if you weren't so angry all the time, your skin would clear up. She patted my cheek. It was a condescending, dismissive pat. The kind you give to a servant who finally followed instructions. Dante and Courtney walked in last. Dante looked around the house as if he were appraising it. He didn't say hello. He walked straight to the dining room and saw the black box on the table. His eyes lit up. Is that it? He asked, pointing at the box. I nodded. That is it. Everything I promised. He reached for it, but I stepped in front of him. Not yet, I said gently. Let's eat first. We are a family. Let's break bread, then we can handle business. Courtney rolled her eyes. Seriously, Monique, just give him the money so we can go. We have things to do. Please, I said, allowing my voice to tremble. Just one dinner. For Leo. Since you missed his birthday, I just want us to have one nice meal together. My father sighed loudly. Fine, let's eat. But make it quick. They sat down, they ate the steak, they drank the wine. And for 45 minutes, I sat at the head of the table and listened to them tear me apart. They didn't yell. It was worse than that. They lectured. My father talked about how disappointment is a part of life and how I needed to stop being so sensitive about Leo. My mother talked about how Dante had a bright future and how it was my duty as the big sister to pave the way for him because the world is harder on black men. Courtney talked about the wedding she was planning and how she expected me to contribute to the flower budget since I had saved so much money by being single. I nodded. I smiled. I poured them more wine. You know, Dante said, leaning back in his chair and picking his teeth. I was really mad at you, Mo. Putting that screenshot in the group chat, that was messy. But I forgive you. As long as you keep that cash coming, we are good. Family helps family, right? Right, I said. Family helps family. I looked at the clock. It was 8 p.m. The sun had gone down. The house was quiet. Are we done with this emotional stuff? Courtney asked, tapping her long acrylic nails on the table. The money, Monique. We need to go pay the DJ. I stood up. I picked up the black box. The room went silent. All 4 pairs of eyes were glued to the silver ribbon. They looked like hungry wolves waiting for a piece of meat. I cleared my throat. Before I give you this, I said, my voice steady and low. I want to say something. You guys have taught me a lot this week. You taught me about value. You taught me about loyalty. And you taught me that actions have consequences. Dante held out his hand, snapping his fingers. Yeah, great speech. Just hand it over. I smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, because I knew that in about 30 seconds their world was going to burn. I walked over to Dante. I placed the box in his hands. It was heavy. Here you go, little brother, I said. Happy graduation. Dante tore the ribbon off. He ripped the lid open. He expected to see stacks of green bills. He expected his salvation. He looked inside. His brow furrowed. He reached in and pulled out the mirror. He stared at his own confused reflection. What is this? He asked, looking up at me. Is this a joke? Where is the money? Keep looking, I said. Dig a little deeper. He reached back into the box. He pulled out the thick stack of legal papers. He unfolded the top document. I watched his eyes scan the page. I watched the moment his brain processed the words Miller & Sons Repossession Agency. I watched the blood drain from his face as he realized what he was holding. What? What is this? He stammered. That is the order to tow the car you think you own, I said calmly. My father stood up. What are you talking about? Dante kept digging. He pulled out the next document, the affidavit of identity theft submitted to the Federal Trade Commission. And that, I said, pointing to the paper shaking in Dante's hand, that is the proof that you and Dad forged my signature on a $55,000 loan. The room erupted. My mother screamed. My father slammed his fist on the table. "You ungrateful witch!" Courtney yelled, standing up and knocking her chair over. "You tricked us!" "No," I said, my voice rising over the chaos. "I didn't trick you. I adjusted you." Dante looked at me, his eyes wide with fear. "You called the cops." I leaned across the table. "Not yet," I whispered. "But they are on speed dial. And guess what, Dante? I have one more surprise." I pointed to the window. "Look outside." They all turned. Through the sheer curtains, the flashing red and blue lights of a police cruiser were silently illuminating the driveway. I had texted my neighbor, a retired sergeant, to call in a domestic disturbance the moment he saw things get heated. But looking at their faces, I realized I didn't need the neighbor. I had enough evidence in that box to put them away for 10 years. I checked my watch. "The party is over," I said. The dining room was silent, except for the sound of silverware scraping against fine china, and the heavy, self-satisfied breathing of my family. I sat at the head of the table watching them devour the $70 steaks I had prepared. It was a surreal experience, like watching a pack of hyenas feasting on a carcass they did not hunt. I had set the stage perfectly. The lights were dimmed, the jazz playlist was soft, and the wine was expensive. To an outsider, it looked like a lovely family reconciliation dinner. To me, it looked like the last meal of the condemned. My mother Viola dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. She looked around my dining room with a critical eye, her gaze lingering on the dust-free baseboards and the fresh flowers. "You know, Monique," she said, her voice dripping with that familiar passive-aggressive sweetness. "This steak is a little tough. I usually marinate mine for 48 hours. But I suppose when you are busy working all the time, you lose touch with the domestic arts. It is edible, though. We appreciate the effort." I smiled, taking a sip of water to wash down the bile rising in my throat. "Thank you, Mom. I am glad you are enjoying it." My father, Cedric, swirled his wine glass, looking at the deep red liquid, as if he were a sommelier and not a man who had forged his daughter's signature on a car loan. He cleared his throat, the signal that he was about to deliver a sermon. "Monique," he began, his voice booming with unearned authority, "I am glad we are doing this. It shows growth on your part. You have to understand that as the eldest, the burden of leadership falls on you. Dante is finding his way. He is a visionary. It is your job to support the vision, not stifle it with petty grievances about money. When I was your age, I would have given the shirt off my back for my family." I gripped the stem of my glass so hard I thought it might shatter. The shirt off his back. This was the man who had stolen my identity to fund vacations he could not afford. The hypocrisy was so thick, I could practically taste it in the air, metallic and foul. "I know, Dad," I said softly, playing the role of the repentant daughter. I lost sight of the big picture. I let stress get the better of me. Courtney let out a sharp, derisive laugh. "Stress. Please. You have a desk job, Monique. You sit in air conditioning all day judging people. Try planning a high society event like Dante's graduation. That is stress. You almost ruined everything with your little tantrum about the $2. Do you know how hard I had to work to keep the venue from canceling?" She reached over and squeezed Dante's hand. He was slumped in his chair, wearing a Gucci tracksuit that I now knew was purchased with a credit card in my name. He looked bored. He looked like a prince who was tired of waiting for his tribute. "Dante," I said, addressing him directly, "are you excited for tomorrow?" He shrugged, not even looking at me. He picked a piece of gristle out of his teeth. "It is going to be a movie, Mo. A movie. Everyone who is anyone in Atlanta is going to be there. I just need to make sure the cash flows right. You know how it is. Cash is king." He then did something that made my blood run cold. He pushed his chair back, leaned deeply into the upholstery, and lifted his legs. He placed his heavy, sneaker-clad feet right onto the edge of my mahogany dining table, the table I had saved for 6 months to buy, the table where my son ate his breakfast. He crossed his ankles, the rubber soles of his $500 Jordans grinding dirt into the wood finish. So he said, picking up his wine glass, Let's cut the small talk. Where is the bag? Courtney says you have the cash. My father did not scold him. My mother did not tell him to take his feet down. They just looked at me waiting. In their eyes, Dante could do no wrong. He was the golden child. And I was just the servant who was taking too long to serve dessert. I looked at his feet on my table. That was the final confirmation. There was no respect here. There was no love. There was only consumption. They were parasites. And I was the host. But tonight, the host was armed. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the floor, a harsh sound that made Courtney flinch. You are right, Dante, I said, walking toward the sideboard where the gift sat. No more small talk. I picked up the large, glossy black box tied with a thick silver ribbon. It was heavy, weighted down by the sheer volume of evidence I had collected. I turned around and walked back to the table. The room went silent. Their eyes were glued to the box. I could see the greed radiating off them like heat waves. They thought it was full of cash. They thought it was the $4,200 plus, maybe a little extra as an apology tax. I placed the box in the center of the table right next to Dante's feet. Put your feet down, Dante, I said. My voice was not loud, but it had a tone they had never heard before. It was the tone I used when I told a fraudster that their claim was denied and the police were on the way. Dante looked at me, surprised by the command. He laughed nervously, but he took his feet off the table. Whoa, chill out. I am just relaxing. I placed my hand on the lid of the box. I want you to know, I said, looking at each of them in turn, that I put a lot of thought into this. I thought about everything you have done for me. I thought about the car. I thought about the credit cards. I thought about Leo's birthday. And I wanted to give you something that truly reflects what you deserve. My mother clasped her hands together, tears forming in her eyes. Oh, Monique, that is so sweet. I knew you loved us. I knew you would come through. Courtney smirked, reaching for her purse. Finally, let's count it so we can get out of here. I slid the box across the polished wood until it rested directly in front of Dante. Open it, I whispered. Dante sat up straight. He rubbed his hands together like a cartoon villain. He pulled the silver ribbon. It fell away, pooling on the table like liquid mercury. He lifted the heavy black lid. He expected green. He expected stacks of hundreds. Instead, he saw a piece of paper. And resting on top of that paper was a small, round hand mirror. He frowned. He reached in and pulled out the mirror. He looked at his own reflection, confused. What is this? He asked, looking up at me. Is this some kind of game? Where is the money? I remained standing, my hands resting on the back of my chair. Read the note on the mirror, Dante. He squinted at the small sticky note attached to the glass. Look at the only person responsible for your life. He threw the mirror onto the table with a clatter. It did not break, but it spun wildly, reflecting the distorted faces of my family. This is stupid, he spat. Monique, stop playing. Where's the 4,000? Look in the box, I said calmly. Dig a little deeper. The real gift is underneath. Dante reached back into the box. His hand brushed against the thick stack of documents. He pulled them out. It was not money. It was a sheaf of papers stapled and organized with colorful legal tabs. My father leaned forward, squinting. What is that? Is that a check? Dante unfolded the top document. It was printed on heavy official bond paper. At the top, in bold red letters, was the logo of Miller & Sons Repossession Agency. Dante read the header. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He read the vehicle identification number. He read the address. He read the pickup order time. What? What is this? He stammered, his hands starting to shake. Read it out loud, I said. He couldn't. He dropped the paper as if it were burning him. Courtney snatched it up. Repossession order. She read, her voice shrill and panicked. Immediate involuntary recovery of asset. 2023 Dodge Charger Hellcat. Reason for recovery. Request of legal owner Monique Williams due to non-payment and lapse of insurance. The silence that followed was deafening. My father stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward. "What did you do?" he roared, his face turning a dark, dangerous shade of purple. I didn't flinch. I pointed at the stack of papers in Dante's hand. "Keep reading, Dad. The next one is for you." Dante, numb with shock, lifted the next document. It was a formal affidavit from the Federal Trade Commission. The title was clear: Identity Theft Report and Fraud Declaration. Below it was a list. A list of 3 credit cards, a list of unauthorized transactions, and a highlighted section detailing a forged signature on an auto loan. My mother let out a strangled cry. "Monique, you called the authorities." I smiled. And for the first time that night, it reached my eyes. I did not just call them Mom, I gave them everything. The IP addresses, the handwriting samples, the surveillance footage of Dante vandalizing my car. It is all in the box. Dante looked at me. The arrogance was gone. The swagger was gone. In his eyes, I saw the terrified little boy who used to hide behind my legs when it thundered. But I was not his shield anymore. I was the storm. You set us up," he whispered. I leaned across the table, getting close enough to smell the fear on him. "Happy graduation, little brother. You wanted a party. You wanted a movie. Well, the cameras are rolling, and the police are outside." As if on cue, the red and blue lights from the driveway intensified, flashing through the sheer curtains, painting my family in the colors of their crime. The sound of a siren whooped once, short and sharp. The dinner was over. The reckoning had begun. The silence in the dining room was absolute, a vacuum where the air had been sucked out by the sheer weight of the revelation sitting on the table. Dante stared at the black box as if it contained a venomous snake. His hand was still hovering over the stack of papers he had just pulled out, his brain struggling to process the shift from expectation to reality. He had expected the green paper of currency. Instead, he was holding the white paper of consequences. He picked up the first item again, the small hand mirror that had slid across the table. He looked at his reflection, his brow furrowed in confusion, his mouth slightly open. He flipped it over and read the note I had taped to the back one more time. "Look here to see the only person responsible for your life." He tossed it onto the table with a sneer of disgust. The mirror spun on its plastic back, a dizzying rotation of light and accusation. "This is corny, Monique," he spat, looking at me with eyes that were starting to darken with genuine anger. "You think this is funny? You think you are teaching me a lesson with a dollar store mirror? I told you I have investors coming tomorrow. I need the cash. Stop playing games." I did not move. I did not blink. I stood at the head of the table like a judge delivering a sentence. "Read the papers, Dante," I said, my voice dropping to a register that was devoid of any warmth. "The lesson is not in the mirror. The mirror is just the introduction. The lesson is in the paperwork." He looked down at the thick sheaf of documents in his hand. He shuffled the mirror aside and lifted the first document. It was printed on heavy official bond paper, the kind that feels significant between your fingers. At the top, stamped in red ink, was the logo of Miller and Sons Recovery Services. Dante squinted at the text. He was not a reader. He was a skimmer. But certain words have a way of jumping off the page. Words like involuntary repossession, words like immediate seizure, words like default. His eyes scanned the lines. He saw the vehicle identification number. He saw the make and model. 2023 Dodge Charger Hellcat. He looked up at me, his face going pale. "Wait, this is for the beast. Why do you have a repo order for my car?" I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. "Because it is not your car, Dante. It never was. Look at the owner line." He looked. "Primary owner, Monique Williams. You defaulted on the payments," I said simply, "or rather you never made them. And since the insurance lapsed 3 months ago, the bank called the note. I exercised my right as the owner to secure the collateral." He stood up, his chair screeching against the floor. "You cannot do that. That is my car. Dad gave it to me." I looked at my father, Cedric. He was staring at his plate, refusing to meet my gaze. Dad did not give it to you, Dante. Dad forged my signature to get the loan because your credit score is lower than your shoe size. And since I am the one on the hook for the $55,000, I am the one who decides where it sleeps. And tonight it is sleeping in an impound lot. Dante ran to the window. He tore the curtains back. He looked out at the empty driveway where his pride and joy had been parked. It was gone. The oil stain on the concrete was the only proof it had ever been there. He screamed. It was a primal sound of loss. My car! Where is my car? It is gone, I said. And it is not coming back. Courtney grabbed the next document from the stack. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. She was smarter than Dante. She knew that a car was just a thing, but a federal document was a life sentence. She stared at the header. United States Federal Trade Commission, Identity Theft Affidavit, Case number 49221. She looked at the attachments. There were copies of 3 credit card statements. The American Express, the Discover, the Store card. Each one had unauthorized charges circled in red marker. Charges for bottle service, charges for designer clothes, charges for the very suit Dante was wearing right now. She looked at my mother, Viola. Viola, she whispered, this is a fraud report. She reported the cards as stolen. My mother gasped. She stood up, knocking her wine glass over. Red wine spilled across the white tablecloth like a gunshot wound. Monique, you did not, she wailed. You cannot report your own family for fraud. We were just borrowing it. We were going to pay you back after Dante's club took off. I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. Borrowing requires permission, Mom. Stealing requires a police report. And I did not just report the cards. Look at the last page, Courtney. Courtney flipped to the back. Her eyes went wide. It was a copy of a formal complaint filed with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. It named Cedric Sterling and Dante Sterling as suspects in a conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud involving the falsification of loan documents. My father finally looked up. His face was gray. He looked like a man who had just watched his house collapse. You called the feds, he rasped. On your father. You stole my identity, Dad, I shot back. You used my social security number like a blank check. You put me $45,000 in debt so you could pretend to be rich. That is not family. That is a felony. Dante turned away from the window. He was breathing hard. He looked at the box. There was one more document at the bottom. He walked back to the table. He snatched the last paper. It was a civil lawsuit. Plaintiff Monique Williams, defendant Dante Sterling. Attached to the lawsuit was a high-resolution photo. It was a still frame from my security camera. It showed Dante clearly identifiable in his hoodie spraying red paint on the side of my Lexus. The caption read, Suit for damages. Destruction of private property. Cost of repairs. $5,000. Punitive damages $10,000. Dante stared at the photo of himself. He looked at the timestamp. It was from yesterday. He looked at me. The realization hit him. The red paint on my driveway. The silence. The invitation to dinner. It had all been a setup. You knew, he whispered. You knew the whole time. I nodded. Of course I knew. I am an adjuster, Dante. I investigate people for a living. Did you really think you could vandalize my car and steal my credit without me finding out? Did you really think I was that stupid? I pointed at the box. That is your graduation gift, Dante. It is the gift of accountability. You wanted to be a man. You wanted to run a business. Well, welcome to the real world. In the real world, when you steal, you go to jail. When you destroy property, you get sued. And when you treat people like trash, they eventually take out the garbage. Courtney dropped the papers. She backed away from the table, looking at Dante with disgust. You told me you paid for the car, she hissed at him. You told me the credit cards were yours. You told me you were rich. Dante stammered, reaching for her. Baby, listen, I can explain. It was an investment strategy. Monique just does not understand business. Courtney looked at the FBI report on the table. She looked at the repo order. She looked at the fake diamond ring on her finger, calculating its true worth. She took the ring off. She threw it at him. It bounced off his chest and landed in the spilled wine. "You are a loser," she said. "A broke, lying loser." My mother was sobbing now, clutching my father's arm. "Cedric, do something. Fix this. Talk to her." My father looked at me. He tried to summon the old authority, the voice that used to make me cower. "Monique," he boomed, though his voice shook. "You will drop these charges right now. You will call the bank and tell them it was a misunderstanding. We are your flesh and blood. You do not destroy your family over money." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had spent my whole life trying to please. And I felt nothing. The cord was cut. "I did not destroy this family, Dad," I said. "You did. You destroyed it the day you decided my credit score was more important than my consent. You destroyed it the day you ignored Leo's birthday. You destroyed it every time you chose Dante's ego over my reality." I picked up my wine glass. I took a sip. "And as for dropping the charges," I said, "it is out of my hands. Once you file a report with the FBI, you cannot just take it back. The investigation has already started." Dante lunged across the table. "You witch!" he screamed, grabbing the repo order and tearing it in half. "I will kill you! You ruined my life!" He scrambled over the table, knocking over the centerpiece, his face twisted in a mask of pure violence. My mother screamed. Courtney ran to the corner. But I did not move. I did not flinch. Because through the front window I saw the blue lights flashing brighter. I saw the silhouette of uniformed officers walking up the path. I looked Dante in the eye as he raised his fist. "Go ahead," I said softly. "Add assault to the list." "The police are already at the door." The doorbell rang. It was a long, insistent sound. The dinner party was officially over. And the main course was justice. The sound of expensive china shattering against the wall is a sound you feel in your teeth. It is a sharp, violent crash that signals the end of civilization and the beginning of chaos. Dante did not just flip the table. He exploded. It was as if the reality of the documents in the black box had physically burned him, and his only response was to burn everything else around him. He swept his arm across the mahogany surface, sending the wine glasses, the steak knives, and the heavy black gift box flying. Red wine sprayed across the beige walls like arterial spray. The silver candlesticks clattered to the floor, rolling under the sofa. "You ruined everything," Dante screamed, his voice shredding into a hysterical falsetto. He picked up a dining chair and smashed it against the floor. The wood splintered. He was not looking at me anymore. He was looking at the destruction of his fantasy. He was seeing the rooftop party, the investors, the fame and the respect he craved dissolving into a mist of repo orders and fraud indictments. My mother Viola scrambled into the corner of the room, covering her head with her hands, sobbing loudly. But she did not tell him to stop. She did not yell at him for destroying my home. Even in his violence, he was the victim in her eyes. Then the focus shifted. My father Cedric, who had been staring at the FBI affidavit with a face the color of ash, looked up. He saw his son destroying the room. He saw the red lights flashing outside. And then he looked at me. I was standing by the kitchen island, calm, watching the performance I had orchestrated. His shock turned into a cold, murderous rage. He did not blame Dante for the fraud. He did not blame himself for the forgery. He blamed the mirror. He blamed the person who held it up. "You," he roared, stepping over the broken glass. "You dared to do this. You dared to set a trap for your own parents. We gave you life. We raised you. And this is how you repay us. By calling the police on your own blood." He lunged at me. It was a clumsy, heavy movement fueled by wine and desperation. He raised his hand, the same hand that used to sign my permission slips, the same hand that forged my signature on a $55,000 loan. He intended to strike me. He intended to beat me back into submission, just as he had done with his words for 30 years. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I did not raise my hands to protect my face. I simply looked at him. I looked at the small, angry man who had spent his life bullying women and children to feel big. I pointed a single finger toward the front door. "I think you should look behind you, Dad," I said. Before his hand could connect with my face, the front door exploded inward. I had unlocked it remotely via my phone app 10 seconds ago, when Dante threw the first chair. I had wanted the entry to be smooth. I had wanted them to see exactly what consequences looked like. "Police. Get on the ground, now." The command was loud, authoritative, and terrifying. 3 officers in tactical uniforms stormed into the hallway, their weapons drawn but lowered their eyes, scanning the threat. They saw a destroyed dining room. They saw a man holding a chair leg as a weapon. They saw an older man with his hand raised to strike a woman. Cedric froze. His hand hovered in the air, trembling. He looked at the officers, then back at me. For the first time in his life, he realized that he was not the highest authority in the room. "Sir, step away from the female." "Get on the ground." Cedric slowly lowered his hand. He backed away, putting his hands up. "I am her father," he stammered. "This is a family dispute. She is hysterical. We are just—" "Get on the ground," the lead officer shouted, advancing on him. Cedric dropped to his knees. The arrogance evaporated. He looked like a deflated balloon. But Dante was not done. Dante was in the throes of a narcissistic collapse. He saw the police not as officers of the law, but as enemies sent by me to humiliate him. He saw his freedom vanishing, and he decided to fight it. He grabbed the stack of papers from the floor, the evidence of his crimes, and threw them at the nearest officer. "Get out of my face," he screamed. "You can't touch me. I am Dante Sterling. I have lawyers." He swung a fist. It was a wild, pathetic punch that missed the officer by a foot. But the intent was assault on a police officer. That was the mistake that sealed his fate. The officer did not hesitate. He sidestepped the punch and swept Dante's legs. Dante hit the floor with a sickening thud. The air left his lungs in a whoosh. Before he could inhale, the officer had a knee in his back. "Stop resisting." "I am not resisting," Dante yelled, thrashing like a fish on a dock. "Get off me! That is my sister. She is lying. She gave me the car." The officer grabbed Dante's wrist and wrenched it behind his back. The handcuffs clicked. That metallic sound cut through the screaming. It was the sound of finality. I walked closer. I wanted to see it. I wanted to burn this image into my memory so that I would never, ever feel guilty about this again. Dante was pressed face down into the hardwood floor, and directly underneath his cheek was the crumpled piece of paper he had tried to throw. It was the identity theft affidavit. His face was literally pressed against the evidence of his own guilt. He was being suffocated by his own lies. Viola ran forward, clutching the officer's arm. "Please don't hurt him. He is a good boy. He is graduating tomorrow. He has a bright future. It is all a misunderstanding." The officer gently but firmly pushed her back. "Ma'am, step back, or you will be detained for obstruction." Courtney was standing by the window, her hands over her mouth. She looked at Dante, writhing on the floor, crying about his suit getting ruined. She looked at Cedric on his knees, handcuffed. She looked at the wreckage of the dining room. She looked at me. I stood calm amidst the storm. I was the eye of the hurricane. "You should probably go, Courtney," I said quietly. "Before they run your ID, too." She didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed her purse and slipped out the side door while the officers were distracted with Dante. She left her fiancé on the floor. She left the family she had defended so loudly on Facebook. Rats always flee a sinking ship. The lead officer hauled Dante to his feet. My brother was crying now. Ugly, snotty tears. The bravado was gone. "Monique, tell them," he begged, looking at me with wild, desperate eyes. "Tell them it is a prank. Tell them we were just playing. I will pay you back. I swear I will get a job. Just tell them to let me go." I looked at him. I looked at the man who vandalized my car, The man who stole my credit. The man who ignored my son. I looked at the officer. Officer, I said, my voice steady and clear. This man broke into my home. He destroyed my property. And he assaulted me. I want to press charges. For everything. The vandalism, the fraud, the assault, all of it. Dante's jaw dropped. You are my sister, he whispered. I shook my head. No, I am your victim. And tonight the victim is pressing back. Take him away. The officers marched them out. Cedric walked with his head down, refusing to look at me. Dante was dragged out, still screaming, his designer sneakers scuffing the floor he had disrespected just minutes ago. Viola followed them, wailing, running after the patrol cars as if her tears could dissolve handcuffs. I stood in the doorway and watched the flashing lights fade down the street. The neighborhood was quiet again. The neighbors were peeking out from behind their curtains. I went back inside. I looked at the broken chair. I looked at the wine stains on the wall. I looked at the black box lying on its side. My house was a mess. My car was ruined. My family was in jail. I picked up the mirror from the floor. It was cracked down the middle. I looked at my reflection. I saw a woman who looked tired, but I also saw a woman who was free. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a fresh glass of water. I took a sip. It tasted clean. I pulled out my phone and opened the family group chat. I typed one final message. Graduation canceled. Then I deleted the chat. I deleted their numbers. And I went upstairs to check on Leo, who was sleeping soundly, safe from the people who claimed to love him, but only knew how to take. The fluorescent lights of the police precinct have a way of stripping away every illusion. In the harsh, buzzing glow of the interrogation room, there are no filters, no Instagram angles, and certainly no golden children. I sat on a metal chair in the observation area, watching through the one-way glass as my brother Dante sat handcuffed to a table. He looked small. The designer tracksuit he had worn like armor was now rumpled and stained with the wine from my dining room floor. He was sobbing, his face buried in his hands, while a detective named Miller sat across from him, flipping through a file with a look of utter boredom. My mother Viola and Dante's fiancé Courtney were sitting in the waiting area just outside the door. They had not been arrested, but they had refused to leave. Viola was still trying to play the matriarch, demanding to speak to the captain, insisting that her son was a scholar who had been targeted by a jealous sister. Courtney was quieter. She was sitting on the edge of a plastic chair, chewing her lip, her eyes darting around the station like a trapped animal looking for an exit. I had finished giving my statement. I had handed over the hard drive with the video evidence. I had signed the formal complaint for identity theft and grand larceny, but the detective asked me to stay. He said there was one more piece of the puzzle that didn't fit, and he wanted us all to hear it. Detective Miller opened the door and beckoned Viola and Courtney into the hallway. He motioned for me to join them. He left the door to the interrogation room open so Dante could hear us and we could hear him. Mrs. Sterling, the detective, began looking at my mother. Your son keeps insisting that he needs to be released immediately because he has a graduation ceremony tomorrow morning. He claims that missing this event will destroy his career prospects. Viola nodded aggressively, her hat askew. Yes, exactly. He is graduating with honors. He has a degree in hospitality management. We have guests flying in. This arrest is a travesty. You are ruining a young black man's future. The detective sighed. He pulled a piece of paper from his folder. It was a fax. Well, ma'am, we take those claims seriously, so we called the registrar at the online university your son claims to attend. We wanted to verify the ceremony time so we could perhaps arrange a supervised release. Dante's head snapped up inside the room. His eyes went wide with panic. No, he shouted. Do not listen to them. They are haters. The detective ignored him. The registrar informed us that Dante Sterling is not graduating tomorrow. The detective said, his voice flat and professional. In fact, Dante Sterling has not been a student at that institution for 6 months. He was expelled last December for non-payment of tuition and academic failure. His current GPA is 0.4. The silence that fell over the hallway was heavier than the silence in my dining room. Viola blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. That is impossible," she stammered. "He showed me his grades. He showed me the dean's list email. He forged them, Mrs." Sterling the detective said. "Just like he forged his sister's signature on the car loan. We found the Photoshop files on his laptop when we seized it." Courtney stood up slowly. Her face was pale. "You mean there is no graduation?" "No graduation," the detective confirmed. "And there is no job offer from the nightclub group either. We checked. They have never heard of him." "Then what was the money for?" I asked. My voice sounded loud in the quiet hallway. Why did he need $4,200 so badly that he was willing to terrorize me for it? The detective turned the page in his file. This is the part that turns this from a sad story into a dangerous one. We went through Dante's phone. We found a series of text messages from an unsaved number. The messages are graphic. They threaten broken legs. They threaten to come to his mother's house. Viola gasped, clutching her chest. "Your son has a significant gambling problem, Mrs. Sterling. He owes nearly $15,000 to a local bookie who is known for violent collections. The $4,200 wasn't for a DJ or a rooftop bar, it was an interest payment. He needed cash to keep them from hurting him. He was using his sister's money to pay off loan sharks." I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. It all made sense. The desperation, the aggression, the demand for cash only. He wasn't partying, he was drowning, and he was willing to pull us all underwater with him just to buy himself another week of air. Inside the interrogation room, Dante broke. "I had to," he screamed, his voice cracking. "They were going to kill me, Mom. You have to help me. They know where you live." Viola did not answer. Her face turned a terrifying shade of gray. She looked at me, then at the empty air where her golden child's pedestal used to be. The illusion she had nursed for 25 years. The myth of Dante, the genius. Dante, the success. Dante, the victim, shattered into a million pieces. "My baby," she whispered. "He lied. He lied about everything." Her knees buckled. It was like watching a building implode. She slid down the wall, her expensive Sunday suit crumpling against the dirty precinct floor. It might have been a performance, but looking at the devastation in her eyes, I think for the first time in her life, Viola was feeling real pain. Officers rushed to help her, calling for water, but I did not move. I watched her fall, just as she had watched me fall for years. But the most satisfying reaction came from Courtney. Courtney stood frozen, processing the information. No degree, no job, no future. And a fiancé who was in debt to violent criminals. The lifestyle she had signed up for, the proximity to wealth she thought she had secured, was a mirage. She looked down at her left hand. She looked at the engagement ring Dante had given her 6 months ago. He had told the whole family it cost $10,000. He said it was a custom design from a jeweler in Buckhead. She looked at the ring, really looked at it under the harsh precinct lights. She took a deep breath. She grabbed the ring and twisted it off her finger. She walked into the interrogation room. The officer at the door tried to stop her, but she just threw the ring. It hit the metal table in front of Dante with a hollow plastic clatter. It didn't sound like gold. It didn't sound like diamonds. It sounded like a prize from a gumball machine. "It is fake, isn't it?" she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Just like you." Dante looked at the ring spinning on the table. "Courtney, baby, wait. Don't baby me," she hissed. "You are pathetic. I hope they lock you up forever so I don't have to explain to my friends why I dated a loser." She turned around and walked out. She walked past Viola, who was being fanned by a rookie cop. She walked past me without making eye contact. She pushed open the precinct doors and disappeared into the night, leaving the smell of cheap perfume and broken dreams in her wake. I stood there alone in the hallway. My mother was on the floor. My brother was in cuffs. My sister-in-law was gone. I looked at Detective Miller. Is there anything else you need from me? I asked. He shook his head, closing the file. No, Ms. Williams. We have enough to put him away for a long time. Fraud, grand larceny, identity theft, and with the gambling debts, he is a flight risk. He won't be getting bail. I nodded. I walked over to the observation window one last time. Dante was weeping his head on the table, clutching the fake engagement ring. He looked up and saw me. Mo, he mouthed. Help me. I looked at him. I remembered the red paint on my car. I remembered the $2. I remembered Leo sitting alone at his birthday party. I raised my hand. I waved. A small, simple wave. Then I turned my back on him. I walked over to where my mother was sitting on a bench drinking water from a paper cup. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. Monique, she croaked. What are we going to do? I adjusted my purse on my shoulder. I don't know what you are going to do, Viola, I said. But I am going home. I have to wake up early tomorrow. Why? She asked, confused. Because I said walking toward the exit. It is Sunday, and I promised Leo we would go get pancakes. I walked out of the police station and into the cool night air. I took a deep breath. It smelled like rain and exhaust, but to me it smelled like freedom. The bank was closed. The ledger was balanced. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't in the red. I was free. The weeks following the arrest were a blur of legal motions, court dates, and the slow grinding machinery of justice. My family expected me to fold. They expected the old Monique, the one who craved their approval, to step in and tell the district attorney that it was all a big misunderstanding. They thought I would claim the forged signature was a mistake and that the stolen credit cards were a family dispute. My mother, Viola, called me 40 times a day from the motel where she was staying, leaving voicemails that ranged from sobbing pleas to venomous curses. She told me I was destroying the family name. She told me God would punish me for honoring the law over my father. But I did not fold. For the first time in my life, I stood as firm as the concrete foundation of my house. When the assistant district attorney asked me if I wanted to press full charges or accept a plea deal that would let them off with probation, I looked him in the eye and said 2 words: full prosecution. The arraignment was the first time I saw them since the night of the dinner. My father, Cedric, and my brother, Dante, were led into the courtroom in matching orange jumpsuits. The sight should have broken my heart. Instead, it clarified my vision. They looked small. Without their expensive clothes, without the swagger of unearned wealth, they were just 2 men who had broken the law. The charges were read aloud, and the list was long. Identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud, forgery, grand larceny. My father's lawyer, a public defender because they could no longer afford private counsel, tried to argue for bail. He painted Cedric as a pillar of the community, a family man who made a desperate error in judgment. The judge was not impressed. He looked at the evidence. He looked at the sheer volume of debt they had racked up in my name. Bail is set at $100,000 for each defendant, the judge ruled. Dante screamed. He actually screamed in the courtroom. Mom, get the money, sell the house, do not let me stay in here. But Viola could not get the money. The financial audit I had triggered had revealed the rot at the core of their life. They were not just broke, they were underwater. The house they lived in, the house I grew up in, had been refinanced 3 times to pay for Dante's lifestyle. They had 0 equity. In the end, the bank took it all. I went to the house one last time to supervise the movers. Viola was there sitting on a folding chair in the empty living room watching strangers pack up her life. She looked 20 years older. The Louis Vuitton bag was gone, sold to a pawn shop. Her hair was gray and unkempt. She looked at me with dull, hateful eyes. Are you happy now, Monique? You have your justice, and I have nothing. I am going to a shelter because of you. I looked around the room where I had been ignored for 30 years. You are not homeless because of me, Viola, I said calmly. You are homeless because you let your husband and son gamble your future on a fantasy. You prioritized Dante's image over your own security. As we walked out, a flatbed tow truck pulled up to the curb. My father's truck, the one he was so proud of, was being hooked up. But then I saw another truck. It was hauling away the last remnant of their pride. It was not the Charger. That was long gone. It was my mother's sedan. The car she drove to the mall instead of coming to Leo's birthday. Viola screamed and ran toward the truck, but the driver ignored her. He lifted the car, secured the chains, and drove away. I watched it go. I watched my mother collapse on the sidewalk, weeping for a car she had never truly owned. Cedric and Dante eventually took plea deals to avoid a 20-year sentence. They pled guilty to all charges. Cedric was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Dante, because of the additional assault charge and the involvement with loan sharks, got 8 years. The day the judge banged the gavel, I didn't feel joy. I felt relief. It was the feeling of a heavy pack being lifted off my shoulders after a long hike. The debt was gone, the fraud was cleared from my record, the parasites had been removed. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright Atlanta sun. I checked my phone. My credit score had bounced back to 800. My savings account was intact. And most importantly, my schedule was clear. I drove to Leo's school to pick him up. When he saw me, he ran into my arms. "Mommy, are you okay?" he asked. I hugged him tighter than I ever had. "Yes, baby," I said. "I am better than okay. I am free." 6 months later, the air in my new house smelled like vanilla and laughter. I had sold the old place. Too many bad memories, too many ghosts of red paint and broken mirrors. We moved to a new subdivision, a quiet neighborhood with big trees and neighbors who actually waved back. Today was a special day. It wasn't a birthday or a holiday, it was just a Saturday. But I had invited a few friends over. Real friends. My coworker Sarah from the office, who had stood by me during the lobby incident. My neighbor Mrs. Higgins, who had apologized profusely once the truth came out. And a few of the other moms from Leo's soccer team. The house was full of life. Leo was running around the backyard with his new friends, chasing a golden retriever puppy we had adopted. He looked happy. His shoulders weren't slumped anymore. He didn't ask about his grandparents. He was too busy being loved by the people who actually showed up. I was in the kitchen frosting cupcakes when the mailman knocked on the door. "Certified letter for you, Monique," he said, handing me a thick envelope. I recognized the return address immediately. It was stamped with the seal of the Federal Correctional Institution. The room went quiet as I held the envelope. Sarah put a hand on my shoulder. "Do you want to open it?" she asked. I nodded. I wasn't afraid anymore. I tore it open. It was a letter from Dante. It was written on lined yellow paper in pencil. "Dear Mo, I hope you are good. Look, prison is hard, the food is trash, and I need things. I need commissary money. I know you are still mad, but come on. 8 years is a long time to hold a grudge. I am your brother. Send me $500. I promise I will pay you back when I get out. I have a business idea involving crypto. Just help me out this one time. Family sticks together, right? Love, Dante." I read it twice. He hadn't changed. Even behind bars, stripped of his Gucci and his Charger, he was still the same entitled, delusional boy who thought the world owed him a living. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask about Leo. He just asked for money. I walked over to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a pen. I flipped the letter over and wrote on the blank side. I didn't write a paragraph. I didn't write a lecture. I didn't explain why crypto was a bad idea or why he deserved to be in there. I wrote 2 words. Nice try. I put the letter back in the envelope. I sealed it. I marked it. Return to sender. I walked to the trash can. But then I stopped. No. I wouldn't throw it away. I would mail it back. I wanted him to receive it. I wanted him to open it during mail call, hoping for a check, and find nothing but his own audacity staring back at him. I tossed the envelope on the counter to be mailed tomorrow. "Mommy, look." I turned around. Leo was standing at the back door holding the puppy. The dog had mud all over its paws, and Leo had mud on his shirt. He looked messy. He looked chaotic. He looked perfect. I made a mess. Leo said, looking worried. I smiled. I walked over and knelt down in front of him. I wiped a smudge of dirt from his cheek. It is okay to make a mess, baby, I said. We can clean it up. He looked at the envelope on the counter. Is that from Grandma and Grandpa? I looked at the letter one last time. No, I said. That is from some people I used to know. I stood up and took his hand. I led him toward the living room where our friends were waiting. Leo, I said, looking at the room full of smiling faces. Do you know what family is? He thought for a second. The people who live in your house. I shook my head. No. Family isn't just blood. Family isn't the people who demand things from you. Family isn't the people who make you feel small so they can feel big. I pointed to Sarah, who was pouring lemonade. I pointed to the puppy. I pointed to the friends laughing on the sofa. Family are the people who show up, Leo. Family are the people who love you for free. Family are the people who bring the cake, not the bill. Leo smiled. Like you, Mommy? Yes, I whispered, kissing his forehead. Just like me. I walked to the front door and locked it. The heavy deadbolt slid into place with a satisfying click. It was the sound of safety. It was the sound of a boundary that would never be crossed again. I turned back to the party. The music was playing, the sun was shining through the windows, and for the first time in 32 years, I didn't owe anyone a single dime. I was rich in the only currency that mattered, peace. And that was a lesson worth a lot more than $2. Monique's journey teaches us a brutal but necessary truth. Shared blood is not a license for exploitation. We often endure financial and emotional abuse under the guise of family obligation, but true family shows up for you, not just for your wallet. Monique proved that enabling toxic behavior isn't love, it is self-sabotage. When you finally set a hard boundary, the only people who get angry are the ones who benefited from your lack of one. Protect your peace, protect your credit score, and remember that if someone only values you when the transaction clears, that is not a relationship, it is a robbery. If you cheered for Monique's $2 revenge, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice. Have you ever had to close the bank on a toxic family member? Share your experience in the comments below.